important question for all of you geekologists out there. How do empires rise or fall? Well, I think we can all confess that gets really complicated really fast when it comes to the rise and the fall of a galactic empire. And we plan to get into all that on this episode of Systematic Geekology. Well, friends, you're in for a big treat this evening. Not only do we have some of my favorite geekologists here on this episode, not only do we have a crossover with friend of the show, Mark Flowers, with Grub and Grace podcast, a podcast from a certain point of view. But this is also a part of our All Reading Counts series. We'll explain what that means in a minute. But before we do that, let us share with you that if you're on a laptop, please consider rating and reviewing our show on podcast, Podchaser, or Good Pods. This will help gain our recognition and, help us get into people's algorithms and search engines. If you're on a phone, please consider rating, reviewing, and commenting on our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This will help prioritize our show in these apps and the algorithms. Thank you for your support. And we want to thank some specific people for supporting the show. I want to thank Jonathan Augustine. Thank you for supporting our show. And Justin Barrett, Ethan Overcash. We have Erwin Hardy. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for supporting the show. And remember that you can get a shout out if you support our show for just $3 a month. And when you support our show and support series like All Reading Counts, a portion of those donations specifically for All Reading Counts goes to our local libraries, because we believe that reading is important and libraries are important. And so what All Reading Counts means is just what it means, what it says in the title. Whether you like novels or short stories or manga or graphic novels, I think it's still a debate whether audiobooks count with reading or not. I think Joshua can maybe have a take or a bad opinion about that, but I think he could share with that. But that's what it means. We like to lift up. We are all geekologists here, and we love the art and craft of storytelling, and we like to encourage reading, and all reading counts. And so the segue into All Reading Counts in this episode, why this is an All Reading Counts episode, is because our good friend Mark Flowers said, he sent us a text and said, "Hey, have you guys read this book, The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire?" And I was like, "No, I haven't. I didn't even know that was a book. I'm a Star Wars fan. Why do I not know that exists?" Well, I went into a Barnes and Noble and I found it. I found the book. It's very thick. It's like a World War II history book, except from the Star Wars point of view. And I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm like, why not? Why not go even deeper into The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire? Mark, what prompted you or lured you to send us that text? And why did you want to talk about this particular book?
Well, first, this goes actually beyond the text. I actually brought it up to you at Theology Beer Camp, and the response I got from some of you was that I'm not that big of a Star Wars fan to read the Star Wars books. So fast forward, here we are. I'm really glad we're doing this episode now. So it may or may not be a surprise to fans of Star Wars to know that the original conception of Star Wars was very political. Although the final product's political nature was more subtle or non-existent in the eyes of the average movie viewer. I'm a firm believer that fiction has the ability to convey powerful concepts, ideas, commentary in more palpable ways than straight-up history lessons. I believe that George Lucas thought the same way, as well as Chris Kempshall, which is the author of The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire. And compared to other sci-fi franchises with political commentary, Star Wars succeeded in the most masterful way, I would believe. An alternative title for this book really could have been Star Wars: A History from a Certain Point of View. It shows how history can look much differently when viewed from a certain point of view. The author is an actual World War historian, so you can see how he pulls in references to real history as he's writing the story. This is a prime example of how through fiction you can learn the concepts of real history. So when you learn real history, we're able to make those connections much easier. You can even see glimpses of real historical people like Bonhoeffer through the characters presented in this book. Even looking at the show Andor, you can see characters such as Senator Dasi Oran being arrested for vocalizing discontentment over like the Gorman massacre, which mirrors authoritarian dictators like Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler, Mao Zedong, imprisoning people for being critical against the state. Chris Kempshall, which is the author, on his website wrote a synopsis of the book, which says, when Palpatine declared the birth of his new empire, he expected it would stand for 10,000 years. Instead, it lasted for only 24. This is the story of how a tyrannical regime rose from the ashes of democracy, ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, and then collapsed into dust. It is a story of war and heroes, of the power of propaganda and the dangers of complacency. But most of all, it is a story of ordinary people trying to live their lives in the face of a brutal dictatorship. So during a 2005 interview with the Boston Globe, George Lucas said, "I love history, so while the psychological basis of Star Wars is mythological, the political and social bases are historical. The message at the heart of Star Wars still speaks to events of this time and connects to the world's underlying issues, despite being divorced from overt political context. Because the story of a fight against tyranny never gets old." I personally didn't understand how those in Star Wars universe could let a tyrannical government take over again, but now in 2025, I can see how it could be possible. And so this unassuming space opera setting serves as a reminder that history often repeats itself in different times and places. The rise and fall of the Galactic Empire helped me visualize history through fiction and sci-fi from a certain point of view. And so now, in our current socio-political environment, I thought this would be an apt time to review this book.
Yes, well said, Mark. I know my friend Evan, fellow Star Wars geek and Systematic Geekology host, agrees with you that this particular book helped widen my understanding of the Star Wars universe. My first love is the original trilogy, but I read the comics. I've read some books, some of the graphic novels. This was a book that wasn't necessarily on my radar, but I'm glad that you brought it to us, because I think within our current context, political context, or what's happening in our world, it couldn't come at a better time. I'm not necessarily a World War II or history buff, but reading this book in light of kind of like reading a history book or history on World War II, it helped widen the scope of what empire means, and kind of the slow game that Palpatine had all the way up, even though the empire was only 24 years led up to that point, and then the ramifications of what happened after the fall. It still makes a big impact of hundreds and thousands of years here in the Star Wars universe. Evan, in terms of what you consume in Star Wars, how does this kind of book and take with this, and maybe perhaps a show like Andor that we'll talk a little bit later on, what does that do to you and for your like Star Wars fandom, and kind of widen the scope?
Yeah, this book is I remember when it came out, and it's ruffled some feathers and stuff in some of the circles I run, and um but it's a part of a pattern that I see in a lot of in my fandom, and in the Star Wars fandom, is that the people, they forget what makes a Star Wars, and that's a little bit different for everybody. And there's that cycle of the political part of it comes up every once in a while, and it's hard to you can't really dismiss it, because it's there. There is a political aspect to Star Wars, and it is it's kind of what George was, the like he is a product of his time, and that's what they were thinking in that time, and he expressed it in what we call Star Wars. And there's no problem in saying that there's this politicalness, and there's not satire, but a commentary on the government of this kind that we have, and you can see it in his in George Lucas's interviews since, that he's talking about it, that he's unashamed about what this is, and what the a little guy versus the big guy and stuff like that. But this is something that was exciting to me, because this is a very important time right now, and it's this book, and Andor, as we're probably going to be talking about, is a very what's it called? Not fortuitous, but it makes sense that people are talking about it right now.
Yeah. So this episode, we're going to talk about a lot about this book, but also talk about Andor season 2 and where that kind of left off, and how that landed with us and led into Rogue One, but kind of the grand Star Wars universe. I think Star Wars, our fandom, this particular book does indeed often hold up a mirror, and sometimes we don't like what we see in terms of our present context or our history. And if you don't like what you see, there needs to be some inward reflection in terms of why do I feel that way? Why is it bringing up these certain emotions within me? And that kind of reflective contemplation, I think, is super important. And it's no secret that I love a big part of why I love Star Wars is the mysticism, the religion, the lightsabers and the laser swords and the lasers and the just space wizards. My avatar's Luke Skywalker, right? But things like shows like Andor show the small choices and the small things that make a big difference in the big intergalactic war. And this book really helped kind of illustrate that for us. Mark, as you were reading this book as a Star Wars fan, did you learn anything new? What highlighted for you, or what mirror did it hold up for you? For me, I think it wasn't necessarily that I learned anything like groundbreaking new when it comes to Star Wars, but it helped put in context the grand scope of what the Empire is or means in this universe and what it did. And I'll give up my big takeaway here in a little bit, but did we learn anything new from this book?
I mean, I think I learned quite a bit. I've always been a Star Wars fan, but I never really dug into like the lore of it too much until more recent years, where I started digging into maybe the comics and obviously the book. But and I've read a couple other books too. I've gotten some audio books of stuff, like you were talking about, which is an audiobook of really reading, but digging into some of that, and there was still quite a bit to this book that I felt I was able to learn and extract from. But I think the majority of my learning was the understanding behind the scenes, not necessarily like about specific events or people, because it touches on a lot of common names that you might hear in like your typical Star Wars film or TV series. But it's more of like, okay, how did this connect to this? And, what is the timeline of events? And kind of what is this sort of background, like monotonous day-to-day life in the Empire kind of like. And so I think I learned a lot of that, as well as I'm reading it and understanding, certain parts of history, like real life history, I can see where some of this kind of overlaps and correlates. And then, of course, researching this episode, learning about how the Vietnam was a big inspiration. And it's been political ever since the conception of it, is that, the Vietnam, you got ties into like Nazi Germany, you got ties into other dictatorships like Stalin, Mussolini, Pol Pot, all that. And even into the prequels, you get like Bush era wars. You get Newt Gunray, and the other guy was inspiration from Newt Gingrich and Ronald Reagan. And then even in like Andor, you get some of the more recent stuff like the Palestinian struggle and Middle East, and especially with like Rogue One and the destruction of Jeddah. So it's you get the politics have been through Star Wars for decades now, and if you're just picking up on it now and you're upset about it, sorry to break it to you, but it's always been this way. So, I think that's kind of what I picked up from the book.
Yeah, and Evan, you mentioned that the kind of Vietnam, or you mentioned the Vietnam War, the product of George Lucas's time. Like he was this,
Mhm.
the original story, A New Hope, episode 4 was 1977, coming
Think of
off in the thick of it, coming off the Vietnam War, and look at the world
Mhm.
through those lens. And yeah, you can't do Star Wars without politics. And I know sometimes it can be too on the nose if you feel like convicted because they're coming after your particular political loyalty or party. But again, if that's the case, then we need to reflect on why it's making you feel that way. If there's something going on, I think there was a a meme someone shared from like a high school friend of mine. He's never going to listen to this episode, but he said something about like Star Wars Day and doing something, and I was like, dude, I commented on his thing. I was like, are you pulling for the Empire? I think you're pulling for the wrong team. With this particular meme, and he kind of just laughed at it, but I was like, nah, it's not really funny. I think you're pulling for the wrong team. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I learned anything new. It's one thing to just name drop a particular city or planet or situation or political leader in a movie, but then to have this book and really kind of iron out for a couple chapters or for a couple paragraphs, couple pages, the ins and out of who this person is and why they did what they did and their connection to the larger story, really help unfold and kind of revealed to me a little bit more about the particular names that you maybe just heard a name drop of what's going on. For me, I think the big takeaway is I started thinking about like the Star Wars universe and the Force and this light and dark, the balance or the battle or the tension between light and dark. If you think about the force of gravity, you think of like a black hole being that intense sense of gravity that light can't escape it. And so as I was reading this book, I really saw the Empire and Darth Sidious as a black hole that just kind of sucks in all the light. It takes over an entire galaxy. There's no like there, and it builds it that way. It's Palpatine's a black hole in this universe, a sense of power and force that sucks
Black
all
hole
the light in. But then how do you escape? How do you win against a black hole? And the small things and details that a small band of rebels to defeat or escape a black hole is monumental and is incredible. And yeah, it's fantasy. It's science fiction, but I think it's parallel for what is going on in our world today, and kind of give some insight to our current context. Mark, what's the theme out there that you want to lift up in terms of this book, that in terms of our current context, what we can learn from the rise and fall of a galactic empire with our world today?
Oh boy, where to get started?
Yeah, I know that's a can of worms.
I mean, I sent you an email, and I think I listed like 20 to 25 different themes that we could even jump into.
Yeah. Your favorite one. If you were going to go to bed tonight and you're like, dang it, I didn't talk about that one theme about this book, where would it be?
I know we just talked about one right before we got on, started recording. I will keep that one for a little bit later. That's one I really wanted to talk about. Okay. I think maybe I could talk about maybe like the education and the propaganda used. So education of like youth, and then propaganda used to kind of corral the masses, corral the people to under the cause of it, whether it's, whether they're supporting the empire or whether they're begrudgingly supporting the empire. I think there's a difference there too. And the propaganda that really, allowed the empire to kind of thrive as long as it did. So Star Wars.
Yeah, let's go into that. I think, a lot of it, people think about Star Wars, they think about Darth Vader against Luke Skywalker, they think of Palpatine, they think of this dictator. But as you said, this book talks about, all the people that are connected to it. And I think, education, propaganda, and even like the tool of fear that Tarkin brings in, it's not just, oh, we have a Death Star. That was revealed really late in the game. But the slow game, or the lobster in the boiling water as you're bringing up the heat really slow, I think is a big part of what is going on in the Star Wars universe. These planets, these systems, the inner rim, the outer rim, this propaganda and education to bring people on board or to subvert or keep them under control. Mark, what is it that appeals to you or thinks about like the propaganda and education of all this in our age of memes and social media?
Well, I kind of brought up the let's see, two different terms like descriptive and prescriptive. Usually, you hear this a lot with like biblical interpretations and how you interpret it in your biblical worldview and that sort of thing. Descriptive being describing what it is. So it's like a reading from the Bible, or it's describing what the story is. Prescriptive is how you basically dictate how that's supposed to be lived out in your life or how in someone else's life. And I think what you see with this propaganda and everything is more of that prescriptive. And you see, as you're reading the book, you see a lot of that prescriptive propaganda. This is how you should be. And, to bring in like the Tarkin doctrine, ruling through fear of violence rather than violence itself. And,
Yes.
and so, basically, where am I going? Like, yeah, this is the propaganda that's kind of building this up. And you with the whole political side of Star Wars, you see a lot of these correlations to like, I did bring it up because a lot of people, it is kind of a triggering thing to bring up, like 1930s Germany with it, but with like the Nazi youth program. And you see a lot of like that propagandizing to the youth, the next generation, so that they will be they won't know any other life other than what they've been told as a kid, to be subservient to the empire and to the dictator. And so with the empire, I know it talks about that, and I forget what, but it talks about that of having schools on different planets, especially like legacy planets, like Coruscant and all that. Of like educating that youth so that they have new recruits and generals that they can replenish the ranks when new generations need to pass on. So yeah, it's, and as far as like with modernity, we see a lot of like the prescription through certain like homeschooling curriculum, especially, and I hope this doesn't like turn off a lot of the viewership, but like Christian nationalism and like educational programs such as like PragerU. And with Star Wars being such a children's based movie series, there's actually quotes of George Lucas actually saying this is a children's film. Like the original conception of like A New Hope was a children's story, so you could actually deliver a lot of these really powerful concepts. And I would argue, and I've heard some people say that Star Wars is propaganda, that the people that do see the more political side, but argue with the political side and then the nature of the commentary of it. But I would argue that it's more descriptive. It's allowing the viewer to see it, but doesn't prescribe this is how you should live. It doesn't say you should be the rebel. It doesn't say, it kind of gives off more of like the rebels are good, but I would say that because it shows that the rebels, they have their own flaws and whatnot. So it doesn't show them as like these perfect good guys. There's a lot of infighting between them, especially with the latest ones like Andor. You see a lot of like fighting with Saw Gerrera and the other rebel coalition. So I would argue that it's more descriptive, but I could definitely see how some people could maybe draw conclusions like that. But yeah, it teaches a lot of things about world of greedy corporations, corporate politicians, authoritarianism, oppression, imperial wars. But it centers everything in values like courage, freedom, friendship, and hope of overcoming all those evils. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on like the propaganda side of anything like that.
Real fast, Evan. I would love to hear your thoughts, but I think it's, again, this book, what it illuminated for me was that Palpatine, yes, he had a Death Star. Yes, he could shoot force lightning out of his fingers, but there's also this aspect of drawing you in to help you. The control and power isn't just with these big major weapons, but the way to control planets and systems and their economy and their resources, to have control and power over how people lived their daily lives, not just to blow up planets, but to rule, to say that they are imperials and colonists when it comes to these particular systems and people. That is what's going on here. And as you mentioned, like the Andor series, it really shows that these rebels aren't perfect at all. They all have flaws. Everybody has their own rebellion, as they said, but what draws them into the rebellion is that what they care about or who they love is being hurt or oppressed or literally killed. And so they're seen from their point of view like, no. What I care and who I love is being hurt and taken away from me because of this lust for power and control over people's lives. And I think that that's what we see in our present day context when it comes to like the battle against public education and what's being funded or not funded, or the battle against universities, because they understand that education and propaganda comes with power. It's going to threaten their power or threaten their influence. And so it's not just like Palpatine's not Darth Sidious, not just a force user who can't wait to shoot force lightning out of you, but it's the small things of power and control that matter in that quest for ruling the universe, ultimate power and control. Evan, anything bring up for you in terms of what's going on there?
No, yeah, just that the Empire is all about control and subjecting you to order, to have order in the guise of a fake peace where there's no conflict. But then we remember that once you start oppressing, then that's when you start seeing a rebellion. And I think where the book comes in, it says where the empire was what, only 24 years, so people still knew what life was like before. So they knew they weren't stupid, that they were being oppressed and they were being taking away systems and the freedoms and leaving the spin on things like the Gorman massacre that we'll get into later. It doesn't really fly with everyone, because there's that little bit of hope in all of us to resist.
Could you say that rebellions are built on hope?
That was just.
I would say
Maybe.
that.
I think I've heard that somewhere. Well, a little bit later on, when Andor on Mothma's speech to the Senate and to the galaxy is that the death of truth is the greatest evil. And so if you can twist the truth in a way that it shapes or commodifies or uses people for power, political, whatever, I think that's where you see people rise up, and that goes into our world too. Again, that whole idea of the Empire being a black hole is amazing to me. Again, Mark, it's 24 years, but the lead up to it, I guess there's a lot of years that lead up to this, and then there's years that happen after it. But the actual control of the Empire and away with the Senate and the Death Star in the relatively, the history of it all, the years, it's a really relatively short time. And I guess you got to tell these stories, and you have these generations and people that are in it, legacy characters. But I did love reading about the different aspects of government history, funding, the technology behind of it all. Again, we have to remember this is in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. But yet the way this world has been built, this galaxy has been built, is hard not to be able to look at it through our own lens.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd like to add, because you're talking about, the technologies that were developed by the Empire, and as well as, colonizing other planets and overtaking the resources, imprisoning people into like labor camps. We even saw that in the movie like Solo. Even Jin on the beginning of the movie of Rogue One, she was be taken to a labor camp. But in the book, it even talks about planets like Kylov with the Twi'leks and the Mimban, and talking about how there were certain planets that put up a rebellion against, like their own rebellion against the Empire's move into their planet, their space, their territory, trying to extract their precious resources from the Earth, and it talks about how it actually made those, like it made light of those possibilities, um, even though they weren't really gaining traction on those planets to really take them over. The people were resisting. They found other ways to make use of those planets by making it like a test ground for new weaponry, or it talks about blooding the new recruits, so that they could get just be thrown into the mix. They're taught being like mud troopers, like on Mimban, how the terrain was so muddy and treacherous to try to get in, and like the locals knew the terrain and they had the advantage. It makes me think of like Afghanistan or Iraq, the territory, or even like Lebanon with Israel trying to invade in there, but of course the terrain wasn't to their favor, and they had ended up pulling back and not gaining any ground on that. But it also makes me think of like the testing of weapons. Makes me think of sorry to throw like buzzwords in here, but Gaza has notoriously been a test ground for the latest newest weaponry for militaries around the world, particularly for Israel and America within the industrial military weapons complex. So I thought it's interesting to read about some of these a little bit more, because you about like Kyloth and what's the kids, the animated show, the Rebels, or what was it, Rebels, or maybe it was Clone Wars.
Rebel.
So it kind of digs into that a little bit, and then they even talk about right here, these guys, about how the genocide on their world as well.
That's right.
Mandalorians.
The Mandalorians. So, sorry, brain fart. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting. The book kind of digs a little bit deeper in some of this, and even talks about more of the Empire side as opposed to like what's happening with the actual local people on those planets. So I thought that was a good angle to look at it.
And I think an aspect of that helped to help me understand, or at least kind of go a little deeper with, is understanding of not just like white supremacy, but like this idea of seeing themselves as better than, higher than those savages, or those people who are just they're just better than the others. So we saw that in Andor, but like also the Empire going into these places to use the planet and their resources for their own good, to expand their power and control. They look at the people, the indigenous people on these planets, to see them as less than, primitive, not as advanced or as better than they are. And I think that you have some of that in the Jedi. You have hubris, you have ego that they're wrestling with. But I really think this dark side of the Force, you see Palpatine, Darth Sidious, I'm the one who has all the answers. I'm the one that's going to bring all the power and the control. And then the followers that's built up around him, the yes men, the yes women, the ISB, whatever there is to help them stay into power, is really the control of the people and to see themselves as better than. And so anything justifies any action that they're going to have against that planet, because it's for the greater good of their own good, that what they want to commodify or use for their own benefit. So reading this book helped me understand, there's different times in world history and in American history when we've done the same thing. And again, if that makes you feel uncomfortable, the reason that we're talking about this is because we care about our loved ones and our neighbors, and we care about our country. And so, the reason we speak up against wrongdoings and against empire, if we see our country acting that way, is because we care and we love our country. And that's why we can be critical towards it. and that's what I feel like this book helped me do. And again, like when you presented this to us, it's like, oh man, I don't have the time or the bandwidth to read this whole thick book. But at the time of like rewatching Andor season 1 and then watching Andor season 2 as it's being dropped while reading this book, it added a depth to the Star Wars universe that I didn't know was coming my way. It's a nice surprise in this season of being a Star Wars fan, and the season that I'm in of being a Star Wars fan. This added a depth that I really appreciate, and I highly recommend this book. Mark, I know that on your own show you're going to talk more about it and go in depth. I can't wait to hear that. But in terms of, before we move over to kind of like Andor season 1 and 2 and what we thought, we've all finished watching the show. We're done. We finished. No spoilers. Us. Mark, have you finished? Have you completed Andor season 2?
I have. Yeah, I have.
TJ might hop on in a little bit. We'll see if he does. I don't know if he has, but before we get into that, like more things about this book, I'm interested. I'm very familiar with the prequel original trilogy, but in terms of sequel trilogy, the third act of this book, like the road to Jakku, thoughts on that, like that whole thing. Even though Palpatine supposedly died, even though the Death Star blew up, there's still remnants of this empire that can get control again in the road to Jakku and the First Order. Any thoughts on that thing? Are there cautionary tales or things we can learn from that part of the book in our own world or in kinds of the Star Wars lore per se?
I think it is a cautionary tale in the sense of that there will always be good, but there will always be evil there too. And I don't think completely eliminating one or the other is going to solve the solution. It's because that's control. That's not the point. It's something else entirely. So I think that's what that third trilogy was trying to touch on. That it's always going to be there.
I actually forgot this part of the book.
Yeah.
So is it just like what actually happened on Jakku? Maybe we can, in case our listeners.
There's one of the final battles where it was basically the Empire's last stand. They all had their they all came together, except the Shadow Collective. The Shadow Collective didn't take part in it because they were doing their own thing, which was interesting because now we know that. But yeah, but that was the old the Empire's Last Stand where Array is at the beginning of episode 7.
Is that Shadow Collective part of like the Thrawn's legacy and what's going on with Thrawn as well?
Thrawn was a part of it, and I don't know if he was aware of the Empire's of the Emperor's return, but he knew of the movement for that. I don't think he knew about the Final Order. There could be some things that say different, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it because this happened well after episode 6, right? Well after
it happened
Death Star.
Within a year from episode 6, probably 10 months or so, and then after that is when we have the show like The Mandalorian, where things are just kind of wild.
Yeah, and I think this is a commentary on how all dictatorships, how all authoritarian dictatorships and governments like this fall at some point. I mean, I think you can look at Germany, and their last push was try to invade Russia, and Russia didn't give them any ground, and they actually lost a considerable amount of resources and men because Russia was really pushing back. And I think right around that time was when the end of the World War II ended. Even with like Pol Pot, there's always like a last stand with dictatorships, and I think that Jakku was a good example of kind of showcasing that, like, last ditch effort to try to hold on to something that they had, that power, that control. And Yeah, and I think there's something really powerful with that. It kind of makes me think of like like Blair Mountain and the Cold Wars, and as close as we got in America to a class war. So yeah.
Yeah. Mark, are you like a World War II buff? Do you get into that kind of stuff too? Is that something you geek out on, or is
I've
this?
never been a World War buff. I've never been a history buff until, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago. And then I just got really interested in reading books, and not just like books, but like nonfiction books, like biographies and history
Nice.
books. And there's something about it that it just gets to me. And, I just really enjoy that. So it's a very
Nice.
recent occurrence that I've been looking into stuff.
Yeah, and I think we read those books and study history and the rise and fall of Galactic Empire because we don't want history to repeat itself. We don't want to experience World War One, World War Two again. We don't want World War Three. We don't want an empire. We want a dictator. And I say that out loud, knowing that whether you're the lobster boiling and slowly in boiling water, or you're like maybe you want a dictator because that's easier for your life. But I think with our present context, I think it's important now more than ever to reflect on these things because we don't want history to repeat itself. And I think in Star Wars, that's some of my frustration with the sequel trilogy is we felt like history was repeating itself again. Why was that happening? Why are we just turning a planet to another big Death Star? Oh, great, the Death Star shows up again. We're telling the same story. But I think as much as like, oh man, we're telling the same story again, I'm frustrated. Man, in our current political context, that looks like we're doing it again. Like history is repeating itself. So I think it's important to read these things, study these things, and because we don't want it to repeat itself. And you can still tell the small stories like Andor and others that will help illustrate or lift up or shed some light or spotlight on some lesser known characters that made some important decisions that led to the fall of the Galactic Empire, and even some decisions that were made to help it rise again. So I think it's important to look at these things. So would you recommend this book to others after experiencing it? Was this a book that you'd be like, hey, if you're a Star Wars fan, you would recommend?
My father-in-law, he recently got into Star Wars through his wife, my mother-in-law. They binged the whole thing. They binged the whole saga a couple years ago because they saw episode 4 when it came out, and then that was about it. And then I am a big fan. Their grandkids are big fans, and that kind of got them into it. And this was a book that I was going to suggest to my father-in-law because he's big into world wars and the patterns of supremacy and the fascination with with large governments and how do you run a government during war, stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, this would be a good book for them to read for sure, dive into. Mark, what's your overall take after finishing the book and then luring us to read it and others? Is this something that you'd recommend for others? You were at the Theology Beer Camp talking about it. Would you keep going down that trail? You're still gonna are you going to get out there with a propaganda poster about reading this book?
I've already been decrying it from the mountaintops in Colorado. So yeah, ever since September, I've been telling all my friends about it. Whoever that I know is like a Star Wars fan, I've been saying, you got to check this book out. It's a thick book, but it's really good. And it'll give you some good insights.
I think so.
And then talking about, the ideas you can take from it and actually see things in real life history, our reality. So I'm going to keep, telling people to check this book out.
And it's well written, like you said, like the author is a World War II history writer and writes it that way. And it's accessible. It's good. And Mark, there might be a chance that you talk with the author. Is there a chance?
I've reached out to him. It's in the process of talking with Disney now. See if I could. It's a canon book. It's
cool.
It's part of the canon. So I'm waiting to hear back from them. So we'll see. Hopefully coming out with this episode, hopefully, drawing real life situations. Hopefully it doesn't turn them off to wanting to talk to us, but we will see.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think some of the fiction books that have come out, sometimes it can be pretty monotonous and it gets into small details. And this, for me, it's not as action based and it can sometimes be a slog. This one, because it's the actual history of the universe and its canon, I found it very, very enjoyable. So if you're a Star Wars fan and you're into the minutia and the details of a larger galaxy like Star Wars, I highly recommend it. Let's transition now. If you guys, unless there's anything else you want to drink, I'm sure this book will come into play because it did with watching Andor. Yeah, season 1, season 2's done. We've seen it all. We've seen how it ended. What do you guys think? Goodness gracious, those last 2-3 episode drops rocked my world. Other than just kind of like gushing over like oh guys, didn't you think this was cool?
Hey, bring them in. Perfect.
Yeah. Add to stage. Oh, I'm gonna add him. Where is he? Where's TJ? Let's welcome.
It's probably the format that I have.
There he is.
There we go.
TJ, what's up, buddy?
Hello, what's up?
Glad to be here. TJ, we move on to Andor. Have you watched Andor?
I have watched Andor. I'm not all the way caught up, but I don't mind the spoilers.
Okay. What about that book, The Rise of the Galactic Empire?
The Titanic sinks.
Okay. All right. So good. You finished the book. We were going to transition to Andor. We're going to rewind just a little bit. Did you learn anything new, or what was it about that book that you enjoyed? Because you just said, you audibly said, so good. What was there?
The style of writing, I think, is so special for. It's just something I've always loved when like they put the little blurb in there from like an in-world author. That's something that's so special to me. And the entire book being formatted like that.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
love it. It's also like way darker than I thought it was gonna be. It was fun to read. I read it all yesterday, by the way.
Yeah, TJ's a fast reader. He's a fast reader.
Wow.
He sat down.
I wasn't expecting it to be like difficult.
You gotta watch some Rugrats after that.
But, I was really astounded. Great writing style. I love getting like the background info, what this looks like to people, you know, in universe, like to someone that's just lives on Coruscant. Emperor Palpatine is just a politician who survived his assassination attempt. You know,
Right.
to them, he's not the emperor. He's not, you know,
Darth Sidious.
Yeah, I was pretty blown away. That's always been one of my favorite things to see, like in games, is the books that people are writing in the universe about events that are happening. So, Dr. Kempshall, phenomenal author. I hope he does more.
Yeah, I think that's something we didn't bring out in our previous conversation is the style of writing. And I think you're right. Someone in the universe talking about, oh, we found this information about Darth Vader as we were excavating Exegol and found some of those that we were like, oh, okay. So you're reading it from a point of view of someone who's in the universe, doing their research and digging things up, post all these things that had happened. I think it's pretty phenomenal way of doing it. I like that style too. And I was like, I know who Darth Vader is. I know who Anakin Skywalker is. I've seen his story. I've seen the rise and fall and rise again of Anakin Skywalker. But if you're just trying to, in the universe, trying to investigate what that looks like and who these people are and where you're finding your sources, was another aspect of the book that I really, really liked. That's a good point. Very good point.
Yeah, and I think just conceptually, it was a great idea to, you know, read The Rise and Fall of the British Empire and then think, what if it was Star Wars? Makes it better.
Yeah.
That's
Nice.
what if it was Star Wars. Way better.
What if it was Star Wars?
What
What if America was Star Wars?
What if? What? Huh?
What if? What if?
There's a happy ending.
Could be. We hope a new order or first order doesn't arise out of the ashes of Empire. Cool. Mark, There's
Mhm.
TJ. He's a founder. He's a founder of Systematic Ecology.
Yeah, we've
He's
done a couple shows together already.
a couple of shows. Yeah, fun. And I've been at Theology Beer Camp as well. Hopefully we can do that. Yeah, this is all reading counts. TJ, the fact that you read this book in one sitting, kudos, my man.
Yeah, it was difficult. I got home from work and I just didn't do anything else. I just read the book. I got a little in over my head, to be honest, but
Wow.
But you couldn't put it down. There you go. That's a recommendation.
I'm definitely
All right,
gonna
we're
go back and read it slower. But
nice. All right, let's talk about Andor. I've when they first announced Andor season 1, it was definitely a surprise that they were going to focus on this, a prequel to a prequel, and really focus on a character. But for me, this series, I love the space wizards and the big battles and the laser swords, but these are the small choices, what you would think unassuming relationships that don't have a big impact that really do make a big difference in the grand scale of the fall of the empire. And that was intriguing to me. The way this was written, the way it was directed, you can hang on scenes, the slow roll, the taking time and patience with these people across their stories is absolutely brilliant. And there are parts when it did get pretty dark. There are times when I like Star Wars supposed to be fun. It's fantasies for kids. This isn't necessarily a kid show. There are times when I kind of miss that aspect of Star Wars, but I think this does have a place in Star Wars canon, Star Wars lore, just as much as this history book of the rise and fall of the Galactic Empire. Friends, take away. I'm going to rest my voice just a second and go get some more water while you guys gush over Andor.
Yeah.
All
If you guys want to go ahead.
yeah, to me,
Andor, man.
right, Andor, man. That's the phrase. It's Andor is so special because it really feels like outside of like Rogue One, this is one of the only times that LucasArts or Disney has catered to the adult fans of Star Wars more, and it really shows. I would say this is probably the second best Star Wars show because the Clone Wars, obviously, can't beat the Clone Wars.
Good point.
But Andor is one of those things like, wow, this is like real television.
I'm glad that I'm alive to first experience Star Wars and then to experience Andor. Like, what came of it is like what he was able to, what he well, the what they were able to get out of Star Wars and to basically trick the fandom and to not hate it. It's they did the perfect they did the perfect trick. Like it's amazing. Sure, it was a little darker, like what Will said. It's not your happy-go-lucky good guys, bad guys type of deal, but it reflects a world that us adults see every day, and it's refreshing to see it in Star Wars. Sometimes it's not complete escapism, and when it's done well, this is the first time that we've seen this. Growing up in Star Wars, I've always loved Star Wars, but I liked other things, and there were other things that were good, but they weren't Star Wars. But now it's like this is good and it's Star Wars. I was like, yes, like thank you very much for this.
Yeah, it really feels like this is something that could have come out on like prime HBO,
Yeah, back in the '90s.
like 90s
Yep.
HBO.
Mhm.
Certainly.
And killer.
Hmm.
But
For
Mark,
sure.
What do you think? I've never heard you talk about Andor.
Yeah, it's refreshing to have the grittiness of it. Like you guys were saying, it's Star Wars for adults. I was talking with one of my friends, and that's the way he described it. It's nice to see these themes outside of like the original Star Wars, the A New Hope and those three, and then the prequels. There was a lot of like camp to them. There was a lot of campiness to them, and there was a lot of where it was a fun adventure to go with these characters, to go along with them. it almost didn't take itself seriously in certain parts of the story. Of course, when you get to like episode 3, it gets a little bit more darker with the transition of the, into Darth Vader and into the tyrannical government. But yeah, there's a lot of that, and especially even like Rogue One, they even carry some of that in there with like Vader's line of "Don't choke on your own aspirations," and but then Andor, takes it a completely different direction, and it's dark, it's gritty, it kind of makes you question like is this Star Wars still? Like is this and so I liked it. I thought it was really refreshing. I'm probably going to watch it again. Especially since I'm going to be coming out with, my own little episode on my channel just to, get my story right and, know what I'm talking about. And even just for the love of the show too. The show is just, it was a good thing to watch. Like I just really enjoyed it. So, yeah.
They mentioned that, I know in the pre-press, before this came out, they were like, you're going to be able to like finish season 2 and jump right into Rogue One, and see in a different light. And I did that. I almost staying up to like 3 a.m. watching Rogue One, but it did shed them different light. But I did notice that Rogue One is definitely a faster paced movie and show than Andor. It was almost like, oh wow, we're in a Star Wars movie now. Yeah, they're moving from planet to planet. They're not hanging on conversations and relationships as much as they did in 1 and 2. But that's fine. It didn't need to be. It's a Star Wars movie. It was a popcorn movie in the theaters. You're not going to hang on that. But yeah, that was a little bit of a transition for me. But it was worth it. It did. And I will say that of course, I love Han Solo. I love Obi-Wan Kenobi. I love Luke Skywalker. I have favorite characters. But now, like Andor and Mon Mothma and Clea are now some of my favorite characters ever in Star Wars because of how they were written and how they were portrayed and what they did to lead to the Death Star being blown up. Man, that made it all worth it. Yeah.
I've got a friend. He's a small content creator named Ridiculous Ties. If you want to go check him out, he does mostly like, for younger people, but because he's young. But he's going through Star Wars right now for the first time. Seriously.
For the first time?
Star Wars
How old is he?
He never saw it. Never saw any of it.
How old is he,
a few
though?
weeks ago. He's 20, or he's 19.
Okay, that makes sense.
He's 19.
Well, yeah, because it's right when episode 3 ended, so interesting. He grew up in the dark times, kind of.
Yeah. He started on like April 28th, something like that.
Yeah.
Finished all of the movies before Star Wars Day.
Good for him.
Except Solo. He watched Solo on Star Wars Day.
Oh, okay.
And now, for some reason, he decided to binge Andor. And so he's like, I just can't do this. I can't watch all of this at once.
It's heavy.
It's a lot. And it is 11 hours a season. So no one told you to binge it.
Disney Plus.
No one said you should watch all of this at the same time. You're insane. It's meant to sit with you for a week.
Like, talk about it with your significant other. A fight over, discuss it. Like, no, Lonnie's dead. No, he's not.
I mean, it gets pretty heavy, especially season 1. I mean, at some level, you realize that throwing a wrongly accused man into an offshore mega prison where no one leaves is literally what the Empire does. So it's a heavy thing to take in.
Yep. Yeah. And if and seeing in our current context, how
deportations,
all that, it makes a difference. I agree. I think the way they I guess released this season 3 episode story arcs. I was like, I remember Evan and I talking about when we first saw the trailer. That trailer's a little different now. I'm going to go back and it was not as rock and roll as they presented it. A little bait and switch there, but I will say I was like, oh cool, we get a Star Wars movie a night. But then like I couldn't just watch one episode. I had to finish. There were some nights I was 1, 2 o'clock in the morning wrapping these things up after the whole family's gone to bed and we finished watching what we're going to do. And then times when I've fallen asleep a little bit and had to wake up early to do it. I haven't had that, but I wonder how they're still playing around. They're still playing around with how they're releasing these episodes, but I like those story arcs. I like them releasing it to know where they fell in Star Wars history. 1 BBY, 2 BBY, 3 BBY.
1 year later, stuff like
1 year later, that kind of stuff. Really building a lot. I really, as a original Star Wars fan from the very beginning, from when it first came out, I really love Andor. Is there a particular, for you guys, we'll go around the horn, is there a particular like scene or relationship that stuck out to you? So we have like Andor and Biggs with Luther and Clea, Mon Mothma and her relationship to the Senate, her daughter, her husband, to Tay. Then you have Vel and Cinta. You have Deidre and Cyril. Are there particular relationships that were you took to heart a little more than others? Mark, go with you.
You want to go with me first?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many good things. I mean, everyone that you mentioned, all the relationships, especially that episode going into like the imagery you have on the screen here with Clea and Luthen, with them being before the events of Andor even took place, as the younger selves of them, showing that relationship. I thought that was really beautifully done, the way they did that. Of course, the Gorman massacre stands out to me a lot, and it was super powerful hearing about that, especially since the Gorman massacre was actually originally the conception of it was in the 1990s for extended storyline, and also with like role-playing games and whatnot, for having
it was a deep cut for sure. And to actually see it on the screen was amazing. It was sad, but it was like just one of those things that Star Wars lore, that to be able to see it visually was a spectacle. And honestly, it struck up a lot of knowledge about real life, our reality history. You look at things like Bloody Sunday, where in the civil rights movement, where violence was done unto peaceful protesters. So you get these peaceful protesters where people were killed, injured, maimed in various ways. So like I said, Bloody Sunday. You got Tiananmen Square in China, where thousands of people were murdered in the square, and some people fought back. I would actually say that would probably be a closer representation to with all the media about it too.
And even just like the Palestinian Great March of Return in 2018, we saw a great deal of death from a peaceful march. And I would even go and stretch it and say violence against peaceful protesters would be even like Trump going for like a Bible photo op back in 2020. So it definitely rung bells a lot when I was watching this.
Yeah, and even like Selma and the march there was some aspects of the civil rights movement where they knew it would be televised, and that seeing dogs and hoses being released on a portion of the American population would move people and hopefully bring a change of heart to a lot of people who, not in my eyesight, not in my backyard, so I'm not going to worry about it. Well, when you see that on TV, it makes a difference. So I think the Gorman massacre pushed Mon Mothma even further to say, I need to make this speech. I'm going to make this speech up in front. What a powerful speech in that time. And then Andor coming to her to get her to safety to Yavin was such a powerful, I knew they were both going to get there. I knew it. I've seen Rogue One. I know that she shows up in Return of the Jedi. I know she survives, but I was on the edge of my seat. I couldn't breathe. Like it was absolutely unbelievable. And so I think you're right. Like this particular massacre, and stormtroopers are over the last decade or so have been kind of like comedy hit pieces of like, oh, they can't hit inside of the barn. You're like, yeah, they're not as menacing, but this particular protest and this massacre brought the fear of like, oh, we know what's about to go down. Not just the K2 droids, but like snipers and the stormtroopers. It was truly menacing and terrifying from the way it was shot and from their point of view. I agree that was incredible, and the impact it had not on Andor because he was there with it and witnessed it, but Deidre and Cyril, like what was going on with them, and you see her like literally breaking down and her hand shaking, even though she's an Empire loyalist. You see what it did to her and the trauma that it brought to her. Yeah, you can pick apart why she was having the trauma, but absolutely incredible. TJ, from what you've seen so far, is there a particular relationship or a character scene that stands out to you that you took to heart?
Yeah, to me, it's really like early Andor, Luthen and Cassian meeting for the first time. That's the spark, and to me, that's so special. And what you're talking about, like Mon Mothma and like the tension that this show's able to inject into every episode makes no sense. It's like hoping the opposite of Rogue One, because now like we know, like, oh, well, they live. This is awesome. In Rogue One, you're watching, you're like, oh man, they're all gonna die. This sucks.
Yeah.
In Andor, like they're gonna live, but I still think he's gonna die. Like this isn't gonna something bad's gonna happen, and then
it's like B2SO giving the odds of survival.
Yeah. It's not good. Yeah.
Yeah. That was
I know the odds actually.
Yeah.
And the little breaths of hope that they had with K2 and stuff like that, that just stood out for me too.
Yeah. But it to me, it's Cassian and Luthen early. That it's so exciting to me. Like I'll watch them meet, and like, they're like bringing all those huge like ship pieces down in that big set piece.
Oh yeah.
Shows so good.
Well, TJ, just to like as I get to the last episode, in the last story arc, there's some pretty incredible Luthen moments and callbacks to the season 1 that I think is as Deidre and Luthen meet face to face. There's a tense moment that is one of my favorite scenes in the whole show, and the whole thing where Luthen says my favorite quote is like, if I terrify you, there's going to be a whole galaxy that terrifies you because of this rebellion that's growing. I would
you disgust me. There's a whole galaxy out there waiting to discuss you.
That's the line.
I was like,
Evan, say that quote again. Say that quote again. Say it. Say that quote again.
Deidre says, you disgust me. And then Luthen comes back. He said, there's a whole galaxy out there just waiting to discuss you. I was like, take that, you piece of...
So good. I in this show, I was wondering who was going to live and who was going to die, because there were some we know with their fate in Rogue One, but we didn't know if they would survive this show and go on to other things. I think Clea, her backstory, and then her like making it to Yavin, makes me think like, man, she could show up somewhere else. And I was listening to another favorite podcast, Rebel Force Radio. Shout out Rebel Force Radio. There was to Blake, who printed into the idea that maybe there could be a spin-off show where Clea is the one who starts or finds the rebel base or starts shaping the rebel base on Hoth. And I was like, come on, where's that show? They moved from Yavin to Hoth. I need that show.
Oh, that would be so good.
I need Clea behind it.
Yeah. Take us 3 or 4 spin-offs deep at this point.
Yep.
And
yeah.
Talking about spin-offs, I mean, I don't know if you're planning on bringing it up, but Bix's baby, Andor and Bix's baby.
Don't do it.
Spoiler alert. Sorry. But maybe you should make a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. But I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on that. It kind of stunned me. I had to look it up online, like who is Bix's baby on this, but
we don't know yet. That's a big spoiler for TJ, but that's okay. He doesn't mind it. I think that was as head. No. He said he didn't mind. We have the slide. We're going to talk about it. So I think like when Bix made the decision to kind of give him a note that says like, I'm out because you won't do this unless I'm out of the picture.
What a swing, man! That destroyed me.
Yeah.
damn, like she really did that to him, but in a way that was like,
Made
I
sense.
know what's best for you, and you don't know. I hate doing this, but I'm gonna rip this band-aid off, and it's gonna hurt. But 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 the galaxy needs this right now. So she leaves. I'm like, no way. I was like, this show's got some balls. I'm sorry.
And the way that they the way that they led you, and it was so heavy, and it got really dark at times, to close on that scene there. If Star Wars is about hope and a
Yep.
new hope, and that
Yep.
all you need is a seed of hope to lead you forward, then this was the one. Seeing her somewhat happy ending, somewhat at peace because of the trauma she's gone through, even on that particular planet in that field, what happened to her, or the assault that she experienced, and then to see her holding a child, that there is hope. Could that child show up in other places? I don't know. People are making speculations. People are always wondering, just like who Ray's parents are. Who is this baby grow up to be? Baby Grogu? I don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
Snoke. It's Snoke. It's Snoke.
It's Snoke. It's Snoke. I did you guys like that ending? Was that something that
Oh, yeah,
I
I loved
love
it.
that ending. I loved it. I mean, to me, it showcased everything what the show was about. It's hope, that the rebellions are built on hope, but it's also a comparison to the way that I interact with Star Wars now. It's like, I when I was a kid, I liked Star Wars a certain way. It was very hopeful, and there were certain things about it. But now, I would say probably 10, 12 years ago, I started seeing Star Wars differently because I'm in a different stage in my life. And this ending on a different kind of hope, a tragic hope, was such a fitting parallel to the way Star Wars is with me now. It was just so beautiful that this is still hope, but hope can look different, and hope hope and hope is a choice. Hope
Yeah.
hope is
Mm.
hard to hold on to, but even if it does look different. So I
Yeah.
thought that was a beautiful way to go. And no, that's not Poe. Please don't say that's Poe. That's just a baby. Leave it alone.
The director even
Just
said it was supposed to be just an idea of hope. So
yeah, yeah,
No, that was my first
yeah.
thought. Is that's Poe. So
No, no, no.
yeah, and to go back, like the idea of hope, and go back to the book and everything. So the
Yeah,
very
please do.
last line
Yeah.
of the book, it talks about
Yes.
Marva Andor and her plea. It says, "Fight the Empire," and then it says, "It can be a different this time, and it begins with you."
There we
So
go.
a
There we go.
beautiful last scene of hope.
And I love that book, which talks about the rise and fall of the Galactic Empire, ends with a quote from Andor, season 1. Like,
Mhm.
fight the Empire. Supposed to be, I think the originally legend has it was supposed to be the F word, but
Hmm.
it was like didn't want to go that far, so they went with fight. But I think to end the book with that is pretty special, and it just confirmed of how much that book helped me understand or experience Andor in a different way as I was reading it along the way. It's pretty cool.
yeah,
Mhm.
a book that ends with a call to arms is always something that's going to stick with you. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
if you're engaging honestly with the book, then it's time to fight the Empire.
Hmm.
Yes, yeah. Cool friends. We'll be talking about this series of Andor and that impact on the Star Wars universe. There's a lot of things coming up in Star Wars. It's a good time to be a Star Wars fan in my book. I think
Yeah.
I kind of share other people's thoughts and other big fans that sometimes Star Wars has somewhat of identity crisis when they don't know what it want to be. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. And I'm there for all of it. And I'm there to dissect it and think about it. And there's things that I like and don't like about all the things they put out. But it's pretty hard for me to to be critical of Andor season 1, 2, other than like where are my Jedi and lightsabers. But even in season 2, they bring in the Force. They have a Force healer. They allude to the fact that there is a destiny, and Bail Organa even says, "May the Force be with you." So there is that aspect of it. And again, it's the small relationships, it's the people that don't get the spotlight in the big movies that make a difference to what happens. That, and I think that goes on in our real world. Sometimes we think those on the screen or the influencers get all the attention, and they're the only ones who can make a difference, and those kinds of things. And no, it's going small in your local community and people you have relationships with in your church and in your community and people you work with. It's those decisions and how you treat those people and how you grow in that's going to make a big difference to how this world operates as a larger church. Sorry, I'm getting on my little soapbox here, but I think that's what I've learned from the book and from Andor. It's the small stuff. It's loving small. It's going small with the people next to you that you're side by side with in your daily lives, and that you the same gas station attendant you see every other day because you're going in to get your Mountain Dew and chicken tenders and get gas. Maybe strike up a relationship and get to know their name and what they're going through. That's going to make a difference in the long run in the rise and fall of tyrannical empires.
The only thing that I was